polarization. It affects almost every aspect of American political life.
Instead of voters being shaped by news, news is being shaped for voters.
Social media is at the heart of that story, playing host to the most influential activist movements and the most vitriolic political debates. But the more our political conversation moves online, the faster it seems to deteriorate. So how did services that promised to connect the world become some of the strongest forces driving us apart? And how can we improve their design before it's too late? The story of polarization is older than social media. It reaches back into recent history as well as the ancient past. To understand why social media affected us the way it did, we have to understand ourselves and how we got here.
We evolved for tribalism. We're primates, and like other primates, we live in communities that are constantly in conflict with other nearby communities, and we are all descended from the successful tribalists. Democracy is clearly possible. We've done it successfully, many countries have, but I think the margin of error is actually somewhat small.
Making democracy work with our tribal instincts is a delicate balancing act. We need enough dynamism and disagreement to make progress, but not so much that we fall apart.
What you have to do is look at any society as having forces pulling it together. Let's call those centripetal forces, and forces pulling it outwards, call them centrifugal forces. The late 20th century was a time when we had a lot of forces pulling inward. The balance between centripetal and centrifugal was extraordinarily positive. We were fooled into thinking that democracy is easy. We were wrong.
There's a lot of competing forces that have converged concurrently to make all of this happen.
This is Kami Akavan, Executive Director of the USC Center for the Political Future. He's been tracking the trend of polarization since the early 1990s.
The polls are getting farther apart. The average Democrat is more left than the average Democrat was 30 years ago. For the average Republican, same thing. There was a survey that was done in 2019 where the question was asked, do you think we'd be better off as a country if large numbers of the opposing party just died? 15% of Republicans said yes, 20% of Democrats said yes, and here we are.
Polarization in America. The data are unreal. According to a poll just out, a projected 25 million American adults think force is at least somewhat justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency. In a poll before the last election, 18% of Democrats approved of violence if their candidate lost. And 15% of Republicans and 20% of Democrats agreed that the country would be better off if large numbers of the opposing party just died.
We are in a crisis.
Psychologist Peter Coleman runs Columbia University's Center for Cooperation and Conflict Resolution. So how bad is polarization in America, Peter, compared to the past?
It's bad. I mean, John Meacham, the historian, has compared today as being similar to where America was in the 1850s, right before the U.S. Civil War.
Most families gather on Thanksgiving hoping that politics is not on the menu, and this year is certainly no different. Amna Nawaz is back with a look at why cultural and political polarization seems to be getting worse in this country, and what might be done to lower the temperature just a bit.
We're witnessing the newest evolution of the culture wars, a term first popularized nearly 30 years ago in a book by James Davison Hunter. He's also the executive director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture at the University of Virginia, and he joins me now. James Davison Hunter, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you for making the time. So it was 30 years ago you used this phrase, culture wars. You were trying to capture sort of the national divides and debates over issues like abortion rights and LGBTQ rights and the role of religion in schools. How have the culture wars from 30 years ago changed? What's different today?
One of the most important differences is the ways in which the culture wars have now become class culture wars. Progressives tend to predominate in the upper middle class, highly educated professionals and managers, and traditionalists, conservatives tend to cluster in the middle, lower middle, and working classes. The class differences are highlighting real differences in life chances and opportunities, the horizons of the future that mean so much to everyday life. I think that there is a sense on both sides of just deep exhaustion that we're no longer part of a shared project called America, and that and even reason or facts, each side has their own reasons and their own facts, and there's this sense of exhaustion. What's the point of talking through our differences? They're not getting us anywhere. So we end up with a very shallow public discourse. It's shouting, it's cliches, it's a kind of truncated discourse that tends to feed our each side's base and to mobilize the base toward action. This is not healthy for democracy. And it seems to me, if we don't commit ourselves, if leaders are not censuring acts of both physical and symbolic violence, these tendencies are only going to increase. So it's a dangerous moment. And my sense is that unless we address this, we're going to be seeing more violence in the future.
Social media arrived into an already polarized world, but starting around 2009, a series of design changes added fuel to the fire.
So it was the like button, the retweet button, and then algorithmicizing everything. Those three changes convert social media to one of the greatest centrifugal forces this country has ever seen. Basically what we call an outrage machine.
It starts with the business model. Because social media runs on advertising dollars, its designers will do whatever it takes to keep us engaged.
Social media platforms make more money the longer we stay on the platform. This means they have an incentive to present us with information that is most likely to draw us in, to keep us engaged, to keep us coming back and spending more and more time online. The most engaging content is content that triggers emotions, particularly moral emotions like moral outrage. So algorithms built into these platforms that select information to show to us, push to the top of our feeds, content that is likely to trigger strong emotions like outrage.
This week on 60 Minutes, we report on how social media's addicting algorithms have influenced political polarization and exacerbated divisiveness across America.
I come here because I'm incredibly concerned.
Tristan Harris is the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. Why are we not hearing from that moderate middle?
The people who are posting the most often are the most extreme, certain, angry people on all sides. And the algorithms reward them the more they post the most extreme things. Let's say 50% of Americans watched this interview with you and I right now. And they said, you know what? From now on, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be thoughtful, and I'm not even going to post on social media. The algorithms will still find that 10% that still are doing it and give them even more airtime.
I think all of us are aware that this is going on. All of us are aware that we are a product for these companies to make money. So why do we allow this to go on?
Well, as users, it's hard because what power do we have, right?
Now you've got the power to turn it off.
Well, I can turn it off, but then if I'm a small, medium-sized business and I don't advertise on Facebook and my competitors do, I'll lose. If I'm a politician and I turn it off and all my other politician competitors are still playing the outrage machine, they're going to win the next election and I'll lose. You know, if I'm a kid and all my friends are earning social status and getting popularity by being on TikTok and I don't use it, then I'm not going to have social status.
I think a lot of the fake news headlines that we saw in the lead up to the 2016 elections in the US are really good examples of like super normal outrage stimuli.
The outrage equivalent of junk food is addictive. If it wasn't, the platforms wouldn't reward it and we wouldn't keep coming back. But it gets worse. Imagine if every time you ate a cookie, your entire social group cheered you on.
We are connected with others on social networks. This means that if you express outrage and you're getting a lot of positive feedback, that might actually make the expression of outrage over the long term more habitual.
For a democracy, the consequences of a citizenry addicted to outrage are catastrophic. We lose the ability to focus on any problem long enough to solve it, and trivial transgressions distract us from systematic reform. Many people believe that polarization is caused by echo chambers, hermetically sealed ideological bubbles that prevent exposure to the other side. This suggests a simple solution: just get platforms to present each side with opposing viewpoints. But a 2018 study showed that mere exposure to opposing views actually increased polarization. And other research suggests that the context in which we see other views online is what matters, not a lack of exposure.
The solution of we should just expose people to more viewpoints is a solution to the problem of the hermetically sealed version of echo chambers, which I think is not plausible.
That is not going to make you suddenly think, oh, look at all these great points from the other side. Maybe I've had it all wrong. No, what it's going to do is caricature the other side and get people to double down into their own beliefs.
Effective polarization is the degree to which Democrats and Republicans in the United States like or dislike one another. It's measured by the degree to which Democrats and Republicans are willing to marry one another, whether they would be happy or unhappy if their child married someone from the other side, whether or not they're willing to discriminate against the other side or avoid them. In the 1960s, roughly 5% of Americans said they would be unhappy if their child married someone from the other party. Today, that number stands at over 30%. So there's been a five-fold increase in the number of people that would be unhappy if this happened. We know that when people think of themselves as Democrats or Republicans, what they're really thinking about is their social group. The same way as some people might think about their race or their religion or their gender, it's what they identify with. A long line of social psychology literature says when you do this, you start not thinking about issues, but thinking about feelings, about how I feel towards Democrats if I'm a Republican, or vice versa if I'm a Democrat. At the same time that effective polarization was on the rise, you also saw a dramatic change in the media environment and more opportunities for people to seal themselves off from hearing the other side. One perspective is that the new information environment, the internet, cable TV, outrage radio, has been fueling effective polarization. Another potential route of polarization, and one that I am now exploring in a working paper, is whether the rise of close elections have exacerbated the problem. What we've seen is an increase in very close elections across the US, elections that are won by 1 percentage point or two, a coin flip election. When elections are very close, competitors feel like they have more to win or lose, so they fight the campaign harder. The campaigns become more toxic, there's more spending, there's more candidate attack ads. They're not attacking candidates on the issues, they're attacking candidates on their character. All this leads to a more toxic information environment, as we call it, which could exacerbate polarization. So
I would describe my political views as the new right. I say that I'm left.
If researchers are right, this Heineken beer commercial, which first premiered in 2017, holds important lessons for our democracy today.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
In it, people on different sides of the political divide in the United Kingdom are interviewed about hot-button issues, then paired up and asked to build a bar, a task designed to create a sense of teamwork.
Let me help you.
Let's just that bit there.
Through a series of prompts, they get to know each other.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
And then are shown clips from the interviews they gave earlier.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
An awkward moment, and then a question posed. Do they want to continue to talk over a beer or walk away because of their differences?
I'm only joking.
You had me for a second then.
What's interesting from our perspective is that showing people this video was actually the #1 intervention we found for reducing partisan animosity. So.
Rob Willer is a sociologist at Stanford University who directs the Polarization and Social Change Lab, dedicated to studying what's driving division in this country and how we might overcome it.
I mean, the way we think about it, polarization has essentially paralyzed certainly the federal government, but also a lot of state and local governments. And so if you're working on a problem where you want to leverage the power of government to take action, most of the time you're going to need to have some kind of plan to deal with polarization.
Coleman's RX is detailed in a recent book, The Way Out, which begins with a fatal 1994 shooting rampage at 2 abortion clinics outside Boston. In the wake of that tragedy, activists on both sides of the issue agreed to meet. Pro-life Barbara Thorpe's image of the pro-choice activists?
Hard and harsh, and angry.
Pro-choice Episcopal priest Ann Fowler's image of pro-life advocates?
Not thoughtful, not deep.
And, says Peter Coleman,
they still remained opposed to one another on the issue of abortion, on pro-life, pro-choice, but they developed affection for one another and relationships that were thick and important, and ultimately they changed the probabilities around violence in America on this issue.
No changed minds, however. So does that in some sense mean that the experience was a net negative?
No, it was an absolute net positive. It was one of the best, hardest and best things I've ever done. It changed me. I think it changed all of us irrevocably.
They've been friends for 28 years.
We at my center study deeply divided societies that at some point stop and pivot and choose to change course.
And pivoting, many Americans now are, through a host of bridging efforts.
There are 7,000 organizations and individuals that we have put on a map.
Princeton's Nealon Parker tracks efforts to come together.
But if you're asking the question of how many people across the country are interested in participating in bridging organizations, that is just the tip of the iceberg.
Organizations like Resetting the Table, Braver Angels, the Greater Good Science Center, which recorded this bridging encounter. Liberal Isaac was shown conservative Kristen's bio. He didn't know she was watching in the next room.
Trump supporters, I mean, it's just, there's no way around it. Like, they're mentally deranged. You're not right in the head.
Because I like Trump, right away he says I'm mentally deranged. He don't know me, you know what I'm saying? And that's wrong, you know? That's prejudice to me.
But then they learned that each had experienced great loss. Kristen's sister died when she was 16. Aunt and grandparents who raised her died in quick succession. Isaac lost his mother, his grandfather, his cat.
Kidders, my cat, I found her headless carcass on the road. She got run over by a car, and like, it was just too much.
By the time they met in person,
this is Isaac.
Hi, I'm mentally deranged.
Political differences were becoming a humorous footnote.
You and I see certain things similar. You and I have had similar experiences with loss.
Yes.
This experience we're sharing is going to color my interactions going forward with other people.
Because you never know what someone might be going through in their life or what's, the problems they have. So just don't be quick to get angry.
It's hard to hate up close.
Dave Isay created StoryCorps, and his experience there has taught him people like to get up close. Moreover,
there's an organization called More in Common that talks about the exhausted majority, and that's 93% of the country. 93% of the country are exhausted by the divides and, want to find a way out.
Like the name of Peter Coleman's book. And even Congress has several bridging efforts, including the devoutly bipartisan Veterans Caucus for Country.
Veterans get things done, and that's what they learn in the service, and they set aside personal differences and political differences, and they dig the foxhole.
Conservative Texas Republican Van Taylor, who served in Iraq, and Virginia Democrat Elaine Lurie.
Commanding officer, businesswoman, mom.
There's rules within the caucus that say 75% of the members of the caucus have to agree on this for the caucus to endorse it. And so that requires working together, coming to the table, making trade-offs.
Finally, an effort I've worked on, the American Exchange Project, a domestic foreign exchange program for high school seniors based on the underlying principle of coming together, overcoming stereotypes.
There's definitely a stereotype of, the South being poor and uneducated.
Sam Bucher was a high school senior in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Letitia Vallejo in Kilgore, Texas. When she first met kids like Sam online,
they were more privileged than us. Like, you could tell by like their education and everything, like the way they talked. I was scared that since I didn't have that education or anything, like we were more underprivileged.
For 2 years, in online hangouts featuring everything from push-up contests to sibling squat challenges, debates over the Confederate flag to is a hot dog a sandwich, high schoolers north and south have connected and this July hit the road to see each other's America.
Okay, I'm about to go on a
Are you excited?
Train station for the first time.
For Alana Ellsworth from Lake Charles, Louisiana, her very first trip away from home or on a subway. But back to the Way Out author for the key question.
What are the odds that America is going to actually achieve anything like reconciliation and bridging anytime soon?
The odds are good, but the work is hard. There are not simple fixes to this. We're going to have to recognize, like addiction, that this is a long-term problem that has been gaining steam for decades, but we can do it. And I think the urgency of certainly violence that we see on the streets is something that will motivate us.
And as they said goodbye after 2 weeks, the kids in the American Exchange Project at least had taken the first small step.
End of vlog. End of vlog.
They'd made friends and recorded it in a blog to share back home. For the PBS NewsHour, Paul Salman.
Well, it's going to get even worse before it gets better. We haven't reached that point, where powerful interests on the left and right, party leaders, high-level donors have realized, we actually should be working together to work on this Pandora's box that we've opened up. We haven't gotten there yet, and that might be the way that it's most realistically going to happen, is that the harms of political division, destabilizing our society or economy, that unites powerful interests to take some sort of action together. But in the near term, all we have is us, and you can never tell what can happen from the results of collective action.
Amid some very real challenges, signs of hope that Americans can find a way forward.